soak this up a little bit. I want to tell you a story about a gift that I got when I was a young child, and it took me until I was 46 to be able to open it. So I'm sharing this with you because it's something that I haven't shared with a lot of people, but it's a really shaping thing on my life. So early on in my life, from like kindergarten until like 7th grade, my father was jumping the corporate ladder and moving around, so I never finished 1 year in the same school. So every year it was a different school, and if you could imagine what it's like to get a fresh start and like all your mistakes and stuff washed away, they also don't get noticed. So it wasn't until like 7th grade where I started to get noticed as far as I couldn't keep up with a lot of the other kids. And it wasn't for work ethic. I worked my butt off every day, but I would come to class the next day and I wouldn't have got it all done, right? So my grades started to go down. But luckily enough, I was pretty athletic, so I found this weird little sport called football and excelled at that, and got an opportunity to go to college and play football, which is about all I could do at college was play football because the course load was so fast and so much reading and so much piled on you that I only lasted for about 2 years before I lost my scholarship and I had to go back to my old hometown in Michigan. I went back there and I worked 3 jobs, I worked my butt off, and I tried to make something of myself, you know, and you just can't do that in northern Michigan. So I had to make a decision, and I decided to join the Navy. I wanted to get a skill that I could have employment at, and I wanted to get a chance to go back to school and get the GI Bill. So I got in the Navy and I was good at it. It was concrete learning, it was like this, like I excelled at it. And my little idea of going in for 4 years just to get these things, I didn't even take a school. Like I was an undesignated fireman for 4 years. Talk about the hardest way possible. But fast forward, it's 30 years later, and I did 15 years, you know, enlisted, and then did 15 years commissioned, and was extremely successful. Did multiple combat deployments, and lost a lot of friends, and felt like I did, you know, some good stuff, you know, for our country. I checked into my 3rd department head ride, and one of my really good buddies was the CO, and he's just like, John, we started this new program called Better Mental Health, and, you know, have you been yet? I was like, I don't know, there's so many other people that have got, you know, a lot of stuff going on. And he's like, no, I can have you a leader at my command if you're not gonna help me desensitize mental health treatment and get in there. So I went and made an appointment, and about 2 hours into the appointment, the gal was like, you need to go to someplace, like right now. Like, you should have gone 5 deployments ago, right? So I apparently had to re-baseline until there was no color left in my life. So I went to home base. She got me into home base, and I went up there, and anybody that doesn't know about home base, they specialize in PTSD and TBI treatment. And as I was sitting in front of the board chair for the DoD's TBI program, who was my personal doctor, he started talking about how they test for it, and he popped into the last phase of it. He's like, we do cognitive testing to see how you go. And instantly I was like, Doc, learning and school and things have always been hard for me. Is there any way we could test for some kind of learning difference? And he kind of turned around to his assistant. He said, can you test for that? It's hard, we can test for anything you want. So a week later, I've gone through all these tests and all these different things, and I'm sitting in this office, and Dr. Iverson's like, hey, congratulations, John, you are the most tested person that's ever been through this home-based program. Just win. I think. He's like, one of the first initial things you asked is like, did you have any kind of learning difference or disability? And he's like, so this is what we did. We tested you in 4 intelligence areas. We tested you in reading, we tested you in verbal intelligence, we tested you in spelling intelligence, and then we tested you in memory and spatial. And spatial intelligence, pattern recognition. He's like, you scored 42 in reading. So from that, we can tell you that you don't have any learning disabilities. And he's like, this stuff is just really hard. Like, life is hard, and that's just my course in it, and I'm gonna keep on. And he's like, the second thing we tested you for was verbal intelligence. And he's like, you scored an 88 in verbal intelligence. He's like, you scored a 42 in reading and an 88 in verbal. You don't see that much of a difference. Like, from that, we can determine that you have some kind of learning disability. And so it was like a roller coaster ride. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh yeah, oh, I got, oh, you know. So I was, just spinning. And he's like, the next thing we tested you for was your spelling intelligence. He's like, you scored under a 1%. He's like, we have never tested anybody this low before. And I was just like, oh, and I was like, wow. He's like, and then he looked at me. He's like, this is such a sad story. And I was like, this is a Harvard professor, right? He's telling me that you are a sad story. And I was like, I don't understand what you mean. He's like, your final test score was spatial pattern recognition and spatial memory. He said you scored a 99. He's like, we've never tested anybody that high. He's like, you've got a beautiful brain, but you've been starving yourself your whole life. Like, trying to read, trying to take in information that way. It's like, it's so sad to me. And if you can imagine that, like, I walked out of that week up in Boston, and I was just like, I don't know what to do, right? Like, what do you do at 46 with a dyslexic diagnosis? And you've already been successful in your life up to that point, still being hard. And I actually got a book on audio tape for the drive back, and it was called The Dyslexic Advantage. And it was just this beautiful book talking about different skills and the different composition of how minds are made, and it really just spun me on this positive thought process. It was like a key that I was given that opened doors that I never even imagined up until that point. So what do you think, right? Like, so really, what do you do at 46? How do you make something out of that, right? My whole life, I've always had this dream to read 12 books a year, which for most people doesn't seem like that much. I was never able to do it all the way up to 46. I remember one year, New Year's Eve came around, and I was on the 12th book, and like 48 hours I stayed straight, just reading this book, and I didn't finish it. The year after I found out, I was able to adjust. I knew myself, and to my own self be true. I adjusted how I took in information. The first year after that, I read 200 books. I took 47 classes on MIT, the online free MOOCs, and it changed my world. So one of the most important things to me as part of the nonprofit that I'm doing now is I want to get into cities, and I want to get into places where kids don't get a chance to get that test, because that's a key. And that will save so many people's lives. It will empty our prisons. It will give people a chance to change the world. So that's my story. Thanks.